we are moving to a completely different approach to urban reality, because we spent 5 weeks talking about more political economy aspects of how cities work and how they develop. So we were discussing processes on macro and meso level. But today we're going to shift to micro level and stay there for a while. I mean, for the rest of this block, 5 classes, we will talk more about cultural and anthropological perspectives on the city. And today, as you can see, we'll start with psychogeography, psychogeografia. Maybe you've heard this word before. It's an approach developed in 50s, but which is based on previous decades of understanding not only of cities, obviously, but also of social processes. It's, in the name you can see psychology and geography, but it's considered to be rather cultural studies approach to urban studies. So, but of course, a lot of geographers and a lot of psychologists and a lot of sociologists apply this approach. So it's very interdisciplinary and all the stuff we like. And unfortunately, especially in Ukraine, this approach to urban studies is not quite popular. And actually, there is like I'm saying the usual things, that there is a lack of literature. So I'm basing my presentation today on works of Valeria Lazarenko, who is a PhD now in I cannot say this name, Universität Bayreuth. It's somewhere in Germany. Anyway, she's a colleague she's a psychologist who started her attempts to understand how people perceive cities and how they live there, how they integrate. And she translated a lot of texts and worked with a lot of materials which were created in English and in German. And you can also find her texts in Ukrainian, but mostly she's focused on issues of internally displaced people. I will send you a link to her articles. Anyway, this presentation, which I have today, is not my own, because it was easier for me just to use her materials. But I'm referring, you see, I'm not doing any plagiarism. I'm referring to her. Anyway, so what we're going to talk today is about psychogeography as a research method. So it's not that much, like, we're not going to go that much in theory. You will have, I mean, if you're interested, you always have texts on CMS. You can always, there's some optional texts you can read. But today we will rather focus on psychogeography as a method, not as a theory or art approach in arts. We're going to discuss what is the difference, and there are like two very important notions in this whole approach. Is already known to you, place and space distinction, but we will talk about what's the difference between these two according to psychogeographists. And we will talk about this method we're gonna try to use during the seminars, urban dérivé. It's a French word. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, but that's how it's written. Okay, so, and we start with this guy. Maybe you know who is this person. I mean, okay, it says Guy Debord, okay, but maybe you know what he has written about. Guy Debord. Okay, I mean, he's not a sociologist, so probably you never heard about him, but he's known for his concept of society of spectacle, suspilstvo spektaklu. That's his like main thing he contributed to social studies. We will talk briefly today about what is this spectacle, but he also developed psychogeography. So our aim is to understand what is psychogeography, not to go in depth with how you call it, society of spectacle. But of course, as for any series, these two like any, it's like the same applies to every sociologist, every psychologist, that there is a connection between the series you develop. So we will talk about these connections. Yeah, so Guy Debord, he's a French philosopher, activist, politician, theorist, and many, I mean, no, the main thing which I forget always about him, that first of all, he's an artist. So yeah, he's very well known in cultural studies and history of art, and for some, for some traditions, he's sort of an iconic. I mean, he also was a director, so he had some movies, I believe, or not. But anyway, that's the problem, that with such people as him in different spheres, you sort of think of him. Some people think he's an artist, some people think he's a philosopher, some think as a politician. Today, we're going to focus on him as a philosopher, as a psychogeographer. And just to understand why are we talking about this guy and how he developed this whole psychogeography thing, let's have a little bit of historical context. So, as you might know from the history, when Soviet Union was being developed, there was a lot of connections. So, during the Russian Revolution, the October Revolution, in English they call it Russian Revolution, which is a bit absurd, but so we are talking about 1917 revolution. I mean, it has a name, Russian Revolution, in English because a lot of actors of those events, they refer themselves in French or in German to it as to Russian Revolution. Then it was translated, but a lot of countries participated in this event, so we cannot just say it's something Russian. I mean, especially here in Ukraine. Anyway, so as you might know, a lot of around Europe, there were a lot of organizations and parties which firstly very much shared the ideas of communism and socialism, and they were sort of supporting the events in what we now call post-Soviet space. But then later, especially when Stalin became the leader of Soviet Union, something like a lot of those left-wing tendencies, they became very critical about Soviet experience, and they started criticizing what's going on in Soviet Union and like positioning themselves as anti-authoritarian Marxist. So they were seeing that the tendencies in Soviet Union were very authoritarian, that it's not kind of socialism they wanted to have. So there is this whole branch of those who were saying, okay, we are left-wing, but we are not together with Soviet Union. One of them were situationists. Situationistes. I'm not sure how to correctly pronounce it in English. So there was this whole political tendency of situationist international, like international as an organization, like international, like and as an international organization. They first of all were positioning themselves as like left wing, like a socialist force, which is against Soviet Union. But apart from being a political movement, they also happen to be artists and writers and poets and so on. It's it's not of course it's not a coincidence, because it's quite usual for, especially for more modern era societies, when so-called intellectuals were becoming leaders in social movements. So, and like now we're talking about 50s, so early post-war period. And as you might know, this, I mean, not only I never said it's so difficult to say it in English. So situationists and many other left-wing forces, as you might know, they had this huge movement, which was, I mean, it's sort of associated with Paris, maybe because of pictures, but so we're talking about 1968 revolution, which is often associated with France, but it was not. It was happening all over the world. And that's the, yeah, we will, oops, sorry. We will move to this, sorry. So I'm talking about these historical events to explain how Guy Debord and in which sort of conditions he develops his theory. So Soviet Union, they hate Soviet Union, but they organize their own political struggles with students, workers, artists, whatever. Paris 68. If you want to know more about these historical events, there is always movies of I forgot the name of the director. Okay, when I will tell you when. The guy who had all these movies about 1968. Sorry. Anyway, when it will pop up in my brain, I will tell you. So that's the historical context. And Guy Debord being one of those people advocating for this alternative left-wing sort of politics, alternative to Soviet Union. And he, as many others, of course, from this tendency, criticizes not the economic structures of capitalism, but he criticizes the culture, which exists, in his opinion, in the society in 50s. And he developed this notion of spectacle, which is a culture of consumption which replaced social relationship. I mean, in his opinion, like real human social relationships are being replaced with objects which we consume. And he has this like classical example of what he means by this replacement, by this shift, is the car-oriented lifestyle. So he writes a lot about how in our cities, instead of meeting each other and walking through parks, we drive cars, we do not really speak to each other. And that's this process he calls a spectacle. So when consumable objects replace relationship. It's a completely different approach to criticism compared to Harvey or to other or to Smith or to Lefebvre, who more talk about economic processes, inequalities, who talk about I don't know, hierarchies, political issues, and other things. Here we have social criticism, which sort of starts with the same assumption that like there is something wrong with the system we live in, but it's a criticism of culture. And the methods and the strategies to change this spectacle are also completely different. What sort of ways of political struggle situationists develop are situations. Situations are sort of are actions which are aimed to deconstruct the usual everyday practices. So as they say that like every day we live in a spectacle, every day we do some objectifying actions. We use cars, we do not see the city, we just walk street. We use like streets not to meet each other, we use it to get from the point A to the point B. And these are situations which construct this culture of spectacle, this society of spectacle. So in their opinion, we need to change the situations. We need to start acting not in the way we usually do. And this tradition is one of the traditions which started the art of performance. So now you know there are artists who do not produce paintings or something you can sell. They produce, like what they do is they perform. I mean, I'm sure you have seen it in some art events when there is no product produced in the end of the art process. And that's the idea which comes from the situationism, that you can, like, in order to deconstruct the society of spectacle, you need to do something which could not be consumed, which could not become an object, which cannot be sold or bought. And one of the ways to do it is to organize some performances, but Guy Debord and his team called it situations. So instead of word, like now we would say it's a performance, they use the word situation. So what they were doing, they were like, I don't know, lying in the streets or getting naked or wearing some weird stuff. So they were using urban space not in the way we're used to, of course, attracting a lot of attention. And through these performances, they were sort of showing people that we live in society of spectacle, and if someone acts not according to the script of the skeptical of the spectacle gets ruined. I still cannot remember the name of the director. Sorry, it's like stuck in my brain. Yeah, and one of the like, but it was not only, as I mentioned before, it was not only like a philosophical concept. It was also a political strategy, and like one of the main slogans they really engaged was, I mean, probably very known, under paving stones the beach, above під бруківкою пляж, but I mean, first of all, it was in French. This idea that our city, and it's still like this political struggle they were involved in was very much urban oriented. They were showing that our cities are like made of stones, but we want to live, to have the beach in the city. So they were sort of showing this protrice. Yeah, this opposition between the city which is made for some use, for something which could be consumed, and the city which is made for us to enjoy it, to live it, to experience it. Yeah, and so these are like these graffitis about the pavement and the beach, plage in French, during the revolution of 1968 in Paris. But how? Okay, so I'm talking about some historical events, revolutions. How is it all connected to psychogeography? So while Guy Debord was developing this idea of society of spectacle, at the same time he was developing the idea of psychogeography. Now I will show how these two are connected. So what is psychogeography? Quoting Guy Debord, it's a study of the precise laws and specific effects of the geographical environment, whether consciously organized or not, on the emotions and behavior of individuals. From this quote, we can see that he tries to relate emotions and behavior of individuals to geographical environment. But in case of what we do here and what he did, we're talking not about geography as physical geography, but about urban environment, urban geography. So basically, they were trying to see. I'm saying they because you cannot, like, we're not talking just about Guy Debord. He's one of the prominent figures in this whole psychogeography thing. But there was also this guy whose name is Ivan Shiglov. He's a French poet, philosopher of Russian descent. That's why it's Shiglov, but he was French and he wrote in French. Maybe he wrote something in Russian. I don't know. Anyway, it was a group of who were supporting this situationism sort of tradition and working together. But yeah, and basically they were not writing like separate, especially about psychogeography. There is no like separate book about psychogeography. There was a collection of essays from different people, including Guy Debord, but also Ivan Shiglov and others. And the idea behind this whole tradition is to understand what is the relation, what is the connection between our everyday life, so emotions and behaviors of individuals, and the urban environment which surrounds us. How do we relate to it? And this approach of psychogeography, on one hand, it's a theory. It's a social theory which tries to relate architecture to everyday, not only architecture, but the whole built environment of the city to everyday practices. At the same time, as it was being developed in this political events of revolutions and of 1968, it's a political strategy. So that's these situations I mentioned, that they were like using the theory they had, they were trying also to, with their art, to politically influence the society. But at the same time, it's a research method, which interests us the most. So we're not going to talk about how, I mean, we already talked about what theory they had in mind. Also, we talked about political strategy they had, but our main aim is to see psychogeography as a research method, because, I mean, we're, in the end of the day, we're sociologists, and what we have our own theories. What we need to grab is a method, because it's method which is not typical for like traditional sociological research. Yeah, so to sum up, they see city as a space of spectacle, as all society, where right to the city is being constantly oppressed. And their main example is the authoritarian planning of Paris. I mean, Guy Debord in his text, by the way, just 3 pages. You're super lucky. You're gonna read just 3 pages, but they're quite intense. So his main example and his main point of criticism is that Paris was planned in a very authoritarian way, which determines the way we should behave. That's why they were doing those situations, because they did not like the way the city is planned, that it constructs our everyday life. So they were trying to change these practices of everyday life, day life. And what kind of, and I mean, but apart from this being like an artistic, political method, strategy rather, not a method, like because like artists call, oh my God, actually that's crazy. Like artists, what we call theory, they call a method. This is completely crazy. So when they say methodology, they mean theory. I mean, in our words. Anyway, that's what like struck me a couple of weeks before, and I was, because I was at some exhibition, and the guy was constantly saying my methodology, and I was like, how the fuck can you have a methodology if you're an artist? You do not have a methodology. And I realized that what he means is actually a theory, like, because they do not research. I mean, they do not research as we do. Like, they do not have interviews and questionnaires. I mean, different artists do different things anyway. So what I was talking about is that apart from Guy Debord and psychogeographies developing their politics, at the same time they developed a research method which could be now used by us in also in a very like a political way, in a way. So it's a proper research method, which could be like, I mean, there are many concrete methods they developed, but what we're going to focus on are mental maps, and already mentioned by me, dérivés. And mental maps we will cover during the next lecture, and about dérivés we will talk today. But before, yeah, so just to briefly explain you what are mental maps. This is illustration by Guy Debord of how he feels, not sees and not like actually experiences, how he feels Paris. So he like shows us some neighborhoods where he's spending his time, and all other things just do not exist for him. It's a way to see the city not as we are used to see it, I mean, on a map. Now for us, it's a Google map, which already sort of determines how we are supposed to, and what are we supposed to see in the city. Following this idea of need of deconstruction, the spectacle, he says that we need to see the city in a way we actually feel it, not in the way the map shows us, but in the way we use it, we walk through it. So he develops this whole thing of drawing the city in your like individual way, but we will talk about this mental maps as an approach, as a theoretical approach, and as a method during the next class. Today we're gonna focus on dérivés, which is a method of, which is, first of all, it's an experimental method of research, which technically is like quite a rapid walk through the urban environment. It comes, I mean, it also might be called flâneurism. Flaneur is a person who observes the urban life without any like useful point, any useful reason. So flaneur is sort of an opposition to person who uses the space with some rational aim. When you need to go to work, go to class, I don't know, go to bank, whatever. But when you I don't know if you can, when you are a flaneur, you walk through the urban space without any precise plan. Like there is no point A and B, you just go through whenever sort of your emotions lead you to. And flaneurs existed before Guy Debord and others invented dérivé. It was just a word which was saying, oh, this guy is a flaneur, he just walks without a reason. But Guy Debord and his team say like, no, we can, in this way, by flaneuring the city, we can actually learn a lot about it. We can see things which we did not see before when we were going from the point A to point B. A lot of this practice, I mean, since that time, these practices have developed a lot. So now you can you have like several approaches. I mean, not several, like multiple approaches to how you do dérivé. First, they were talking about that we need to just quickly go through the city and see in some chaotic way, and then like come and then in the end sort of try to remember what we experience, and in this way have some conclusions about our experience, theorize them somehow. Now you have like every person who does dérivé has his own approach, I would say. Some just like come to some place and stand there. Some are getting lost. Some, I don't know, using, so basically the game with Pokemons. Do you know this one, Pokemon Go? Or you're too young for this? Do you know the game, the Pokemon Go? With your smartphone, you look for Pokemon? No, you don't know the game. Yeah, okay, you know the game. Like, okay, I never played it actually, but it was such a thing like couple of years ago. No, it was like 4 years ago, I think, or three. Like everyone was playing those Pokemon. This is like 100% is a derivative. When you let something else apart from rational reason drive you through the urban space. But to be like more, what I'm gonna present you as a derivé is more a sociological approach to it. Sorry, more like anthropological. When we are not just flaneuring the city because it's fun. Because I mean, it's not. I'm saying to you now that it's a research method, but it's just one way to look at it. At the same time, it's a game. At the same time, it's just a way to learn. For a psychologist, dérivé is a way to learn something about yourself, about the personality. We as a sociologist will look at it as an anthropological tool. And to do this, we need to focus on this distinction between place and space, which I mentioned before. So from this anthropological point of view, space is as you know it from Lefebvre, from what we spoke before, is an abstract, socially constructed idea which is shared even among those who never experienced this space. Maybe this formulation looks abstract. Socially constructed idea. Oh, this formulation is like really bad. I need to rewrite it. Anyway, as you know, space is something we imagine collectively. Of course, everything was we imagine collectively. Is an abstract idea which we imagine as a collective, but we can imagine some space without being there. So we know that there is Lviv. We know there's a space of Lviv. We know there's a space of London. It's mediated, of course, to us this idea through maps, not through text, which might, which might give this illusion that space is something objective because, oh, there is a map. But that's like, map is also a way to create illusions, of course. And we know that there is this space of Lviv. We can even draw maybe in our head, but none of us was in every point of the city. I mean, maybe some were, but it's not what I'm saying. It's not necessary to experience space to know about it. Place, on the contrary, it's a node in the space which we actually experienced. And for anthropologists and for psychogeographists, this idea of experience is central to the idea of place, because there is no place without an experience. Something becomes a place for us only when we practice there something. You can also say, but then how can you think about a place which you did not experience and not to think about it as a place? Yeah, you cannot. So it's sort of explanation of a place which goes in circle. Because, for example, I have never been to I have been in so many places. I don't know where I haven't been. Okay, I have never been to Venice. Yes, that's the one place I have never been. So I have never been to Venice, but I know, I have seen in the movies these boats in which they go through the space, and as I have seen it virtually, I can say that I experienced it in a way. So it also becomes a place for me. But however, as this experience was not super direct, it's still very vague understanding of places in Venice as a place. So is this distinction between space and place clear? Could you give me an example of what is a place? Give me an example of a place. Okay. Okay, but example. Okay, this is example which is known by many, but by many people. Everyone in Lviv knows what is Uku. It's both a place and a space, but then could you think about an example of a place which is a place just for one or two individuals? Maybe you would like to. Yes, that's for example, home. Our home is place which exists as it's a super important place, but it exists as this super important place only for several people, but it has a lot of symbolic weight there. When I asked your colleagues about this space place thing, they told me that like this things with drugs, zakladki, that's like a perfect example of place, because for most of people it looks like just some, like there is nothing. But for three people, for those who puts, for those who takes, and for the cop, this is like super important note in the space. So there are different ways to think about places, but the main idea I want you to catch that place is an experience. If you do not experience it, it is not a place, and the meaning sorry, yeah, and the place become a place when you experience it. Very weird sort of sentence, but I hope you get me. Yeah, and then if we're experiencing some places collectively in our everyday practices, they have very good chances to become like our social identity, and maybe even spatial. An example, I don't know, I go to the same bar like every week, and there are also people who are going there, and that's the only place we actually meet there, where I actually meet those exact people, and that's the only place which connects us. So we build this spatial identity. We feel that we are part of the same group just because we share the place. This is an example of like pure spatial identity. But these things as like social and spatial identity, they can also like come together. Maybe you could think about an example of how place, practice, and identity could be connected. Daria is not with us today because that's what she writes in her, how you call it, thesis about space identity. But think about spatial identities. Do you have any? If you want to speak, I can. Yeah, neighborhood identities. Like that was actually the first thing which happened to me when I moved to Lviv. Okay, I went to a bar. What else I do? And I met this guy who told me, who was like, "Ah, you came from Kiev, and I came from Sikhiv here." So he was saying that I came like so. For those, for Chloe, like Sikhiv is a district in Lviv, but this guy lives there and he perceives it as like a separate space from the city. So he was telling me like, "Oh, I came like from another city, but it's the district in inside of Lviv, like formally." But that's also the whole point, that the way we see the city on the map, on the official map, it's a completely different of how we experience it in everyday life. But what about, apart from neighborhood identities? Yes, churches, of course, of course. So look, even like that's also something very Galician. When people go to church, it's very obvious that they have like a shared identity. But you can also, like when you, for example, pass near the church in the bus or in the tram, people do this. And they like those who do it, those who do this ritual, they like, though they're now in the tram, in the public transport, but they see that they are sort of together, that they are part of the same group. And that's so that's like a social function of the ritual, of a religious ritual, that you're not in the church directly, you're not like there, but you're just passing very quickly near it, and you show to all others that, oh, I'm a Christian, and you also strengthen this group identity. You can see that others are doing this, so I'm not alone. We believe in God. Everything is cool or not cool. Yeah, I don't know. What else? Which rules? Sorry, maybe you want to speak. I can. If this tradition becomes like a part, like a reason for an identity of Lvivan or a person from Odessa, Odessit, then yes. But just this like traditions, they are not automatically give us an identity, like produce an identity, but they might be part of it. Like I can say that, oh, in Odessa we're really I don't know if they do it. Anya is not with us, but if in Odessa people will say like, oh, we pay in the end of the ride because we're special, because we're cool, because we're from Odessa. Then this tradition, which is attached to something spatial, as a marshrutka, as a bus, then yes. But I'm not sure they have an identity based on this tradition. Probably they do. In Odessa, they might have. Actually, there is another city in which they pay in the end, not a big one. These like these notions of like spatial identity, they might be. That's why I wanted. It's a pity Daria is not with us today, because she was explaining how in her diploma, in her thesis, she was defending it a couple of weeks ago. It was very interesting how she was showing the ways young people, like her topic is how young people spend their free time. But she was explaining how, for example, some places, as for example rave parties, or churches, or nature, become these spaces where people come, like where young people spend their time, but at the same time they start thinking about themselves as people who are mountain goers. Weird word, but they create like subcultures there, and this is and this subculture is based not only on the activity but also on the place. And they see this, and that's even more interesting, how they start seeing the space. And she was showing how, like, for people, I mean, it's her hypothesis, but it very makes sense if we're talking about spatial identities, how activities in the nature, like going to mountains, sort of plays the same social function as going to religious practices. And in the way people talk about it, in the way they experience it, and the emotions, in sort of emotions they have during these practices, being in those spaces. So, okay, I hope you got the difference between, I mean, the space place, quite obvious difference, but spatial identity is, I mean, not every, that's the same, that like often identity is not, okay, every identity is a social identity, it's shared by a group, but not every social identity is spatial. Every spatial is social, obviously, because every that's I'm explaining something obvious, but I hope, like, for example, I mean, spatial identity is an identity which includes there some sort of spatial aspect. I don't know, the people who go jogging in the morning, they go to the same park, probably they do not really think about it. Probably they do not say, oh, this place is like special for me, I identify myself with it. They go there because it's just comfortable to run in the park, but as all the people go there to run in the park more or less at the same time in the morning, they see each other and they motivate each other to go running every morning. Some even form like real social groups where they identify themselves with a group, where they say hi to each other. And why are we talking about this place, space, and all these things? Because that's how we can look at dérivé as it's a use of space in which you're not supposed to experience the places in the way you're used to experience them. So during the derivé, the main aim is to have some special, distinct experience of place compared to what you usually do. For example, you go to the campus. I mean, you used to go to the campus. Now we all stay at home. But you go to campus, and usually you know that there is library, there is a canteen. Here I have classes, here I smoke, here I have coffee, here I meet friends. But imagine if you would go through campus looking for hopefully not zakladka, but looking for some objects. For example, you knew that your friends put something on the campus and you need to look for it. You will not look to the usual places you use for some reason. You would see things you have not seen before. And probably campus is a bad example because the campus we have is quite small and it's like we know every part of it. But then imagine you are in some new part of the city, which you more or less know the city, but you're there. And another way which was used, for example, by Walter Benjamin is intoxication, to have this effect of new experiences in the old place, in the known place. Walter Benjamin has this very interesting essay on hashish in Marseille, where he says that we need to do dérivé smoking drugs. Yeah. But the same idea was in many other works, that when you are drunk or intoxicated in any other way, you experience the space in a different way. Probably because you're too drunk and you cannot walk. But what we are gonna do is that we're gonna use our imagination. So we do not have time to go far away in new parts of our cities. We are not using drugs, as you remember. Drugs are really bad. But we have imagination. So what I really want to do with you this week is to have some urban dérivé with just with imagination, unfortunately. Maybe next time you can apply another method of Benjamin. But yeah, so the idea is to take some space. It might be like that's the whole thing that Guy Debord and his team, they were like, as in this slide, they had big neighborhoods which they were deriving through. We will just take accessible for us, space accessible for us by foot. Or, I mean, if you want, for those who are not in Lviv, you're free to like walk from for 30 kilometers and just like, I don't know, if once, I mean, when I'm a tourist, sometimes I have like super crazy derivates of like one street, and I just go from one from like Вулиця Shevchenka 1 to Вулиця Shevchenka 120. You can do this either in New York or in Chernivtsi, where you have like one street which goes through the whole city. I mean, in many other places. So there is no rule, like there are no rules of how much space you take. You can take the whole city and like spend there 2 days just like walking around and getting high and have some, I don't know, mystical experience. You can also choose like one building or one square or like just, I don't know, one bench. And you can think about the experiences of this one small place. What is accessible for us is to choose like very small part of the spaces, but not in the center of the city. I will, for those who are in Lviv, we will meet on campus and have like spaces which are close to the campus. If for those who are not in Lviv, if you're doing this alone, you can take, I don't know, either one brick in the wall, or you can take the whole city. This doesn't matter. How to do the derive? There are also no rules. The main thing is to experience the space not in the way you're used to. And that's the whole thing, because there is no like strict indicators for which you have to look for. You just need to see something which you didn't see before and try to relate it to what you know about how society works or how cities work. It might be quite complicated because like you see a bench there, like graffitis there. But okay, let's like think about a bench in the park. So imagine we're doing the derive of a bench in the park. First of all, you see the bench. So you think about the sort of public space which is being organized for people to spend their free time. What we can say about free time of people from this bench? Usually, often it's quite dirty around the bench. Like you can see beer bottles, you can see seeds there, like sunflower seeds. Probably it was cleaned. By whom? Who does it? Who in our city cleans parks? Layers of the farba. How do you say it in English? Paint. Like recently, I was at this kindergarten space. Playground. Child playground. And like you could see there like layers of paint, like 5 of them. And like looking at these layers of paint, you can think like, why were they painting it red? Why were they painted blue? And so on. Graffitis, everything like which is which you're not trying to pay attention when you're actually walking from the point A to point B. But you're, I mean, to sort of, that's like how you can do it. For our like small projects, let's try to imagine that we are making videos for people who, first of all, we need to speak about the places we're used to in English. That's already one step of this stepping away from the usual practice, because we think about the places we experience in our native language. But when we need to think about them in like in a foreign language, we need to think about words which we're not using in everyday life. So it's one way to use the space not in the way we are used to. Second thing, imagine that you're from here, but you're explaining this space. You're doing like a small tour for a person who is completely out of this world. So he or she never has been to Lviv, to post-socialist space at all, and you need to explain like why this bench is here, why it has several layers of paint, why people eat sunflower seeds in this country because no one does it in other countries, why do, I don't know, people drink, I mean, okay, beer, people drink everywhere. So I hope, I mean, it's an experimental method. So I mean, I'm giving you a space to do whatever you want, and then we will see what comes out of it. But like, as you are sociologists, probably you will see there some spatial identities. Probably not. Probably you will see how cities are being managed. Like, for example, if you were doing a derivé about a bench in Vienna, you would see there a number on which you could call and say, oh, this bench is broken. In Ukraine, we do not have those numbers where you can call and say this bench is broken. The benches are just broken and no one really cares. I mean, some people care, probably. Anyway, I hope, okay, now you have here are here's more detailed explanation for the project I want you to have. I mean, please read Guy Debord. It's just 3 pages, but this text is quite intense. And remember, you're reading like not a typical sociological text. Last year, we had an issue with Guy Debord because he uses a lot of like rhetorical questions. He says they're like, desert is monotheistic, is Paris, is like neighborhoods of Paris atheistic, and like a lot of people were actually writing me in reflections that like desert is monotheistic. So desert is not monotheistic and Paris is not atheistic. It's just the way he questioned, like he tries to say us something about with these symbols of monotheism and atheism. So please remember, it's not like a textbook. It's an essay by an artist. Yeah, and as a result of your derivé, you need to create a video. It might be also, I'm not restricting you in a format. It might be a video. It might, I was also, that's what I forgot to highlight. Typical examples of derivé is what we can usually see in Instagram stories of some people when they just like walk and like take pictures of everything they see. That's an example of derivé. Probably you did it in your life when you were just like walking through the city and taking pictures and like posting like 50 of them. That's what you can do if you do not want to make a video. You can make like an Instagram story derivé. But yeah, I mean, depends. I mean, you can use any format you want, but as it's a very visual sort of thing, I thought video is a good media, but whatever you decide. And so we do in Lviv, we do the derivé on Thursday morning. Sorry, I did not write Thursday, but it's, yeah. So we will divide our I don't know, in 3-4 groups. I will show you different directions and like come to every group and spend with you some time and then go to other group. For those who are not in Lviv, there is no formal seminar for you, but you have the same project to fulfill. Go outside of your place and film it without no reason, and then try to probably reflect on it somehow. If it does not, like, if your derivé will not have any theoretical reflections, it's completely fine, because it's all like, it's in a some assumptions, they might come, they might not come. Probably it will be just a nice walk when you will see things you did not see before, and that's it. Maybe you would like to do it, I mean, for those who have individual assignments, you can also do it in a group, like with your friends. The main thing about this derivé is that you cannot do it while you're going to the shop, while you're going somewhere with a reason. So we just walk through the city with no reason. We take pictures or film what interests us. Then we try to understand what we have seen. That's it. Okay, now I will let me stop the recording, and then maybe you have questions. I know that